books, so we're going to do a dual reading. Chris is going to do the majority of it because he's a lot better at doing the accents than I am. I'm going to pick up a couple of the ones, predominantly the ones that Geordie. Okay. We'll give, to be honest, Fiona's just going to have to miss the beginning of it, so... right. This is the section from forthcoming final part of the High Moor trilogy, High Moor 3 Bloodmoon.
31st December 2008, Weardale Industrial Estate, High Moor, 19:15 hours. Daniel got out of the car and sighed. The town of High Moor stretched out below him, an orange neon organism with the white glow of car headlights pulsing through its arteries. Thousands of unsuspecting people were getting ready to celebrate the start of the new year. Soon, the bars, restaurants and houses of High Moor would begin to fill up. Families and friends coming together to put the horrors of the last few months behind them and to look forward in hope to what the next year would bring, hoping and praying that those terrible events of October and November would be the end of their ordeal, not realising that the worst was yet to come. He reached into his pocket and retrieved the satellite phone, and then punched in the number. After a few seconds, the connection was made and Christophe's voice crackled through the speaker.
Comrade Braun, is everything ready?
Everyone's in place, Christophe, but I wanted to ask you, beg you, one more time. Stop this insanity, please. This assault will be the end of us. There'll be no going back after this.
Bah! You are going soft, Daniel. You spend too much time with the gods. There was no going back once the humans learned of our existence. What would you have us do? Cower in basements like beaten dogs waiting for them to hunt us down?
There's growing support for us within the humans. Not all of them agree with the actions of their government. If we do this tonight, then that support will vanish. We'll prove ourselves to be the monsters they fear us to be.
What do I care for their support, their sympathy? They believe us to be monsters, and they are right. They feared our kind for centuries. It is time that they learn to fear us again. Now, tell me of the plan.
Daniel's shoulders sagged. He'd known that he'd get nowhere with Christophe. Lucas he could have perhaps reasoned with, not the big Armenian though. Once his mind was set, then there was not a force on this earth that would make him change it.
I have teams assigned to the power substation, the telephone exchange, the mobile telephone towers. We'll take out the police station first, and then, on the stroke of midnight, we'll black the town out and begin the assault.
Good, good. Now, don't let me keep you from your task, Comrade Braun. We will speak again tomorrow.
The line went dead. He put the phone back into his pocket, then looked up at the two young werewolves that had gotten out of their car during his conversation with his alpha. Matty Cash and Melissa Grove had lost their entire families on Christmas Eve and had been among the first to volunteer for assignment. "Well," said Matty, "are we on?" Daniel fought against the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm him.
"Yes, you and Melissa know what to do."
The two young wolves grinned at him, then rushed back to their car and drove away. The plan was in motion now. Nothing could stop it. Daniel crossed himself.
May God have mercy upon me for what I've done, and for what I'm about to do.
Then he turned towards the other waiting vehicles and went to give the wolves their orders. 31st December 2008, High Moor Police Station, 20:35 hours. Constable Stephen Bacon got out of his squad car and keyed in the access code for the police station rear door. The magnetic lock clicked open, and he nodded a greeting to Bruce Blanchard, one of the private security staff who administered the station's custody suite, while Constable Pete Gibbons got out of the car's passenger side and stood beside him. Bruce smiled.
"Evening, lads. Looks like the nice festivities are kicking off nice and early this year. What you got for me?"
Stephen looked back over to the police car and the two shapes on the back seat. Two of them, one male, one female, mid to late 20s. Got them kicking the shit out of some poor bastard in the high street. The woman bit a chunk right out of the kid's arm. Gave me a couple of nasty scratches as well while we were getting the cuffs on them. Bruce stroked his chin.
"Do you think we're going to need some extra bodies to get him inside?"
Stephen thought about this for a moment, then nodded his assent. "Yeah, no sense in making this harder than it needs to be. Better get Paul off his fat ass to give us a hand in case they decide to get frisky."
"I heard that, you cheeky tosser,"
said Paul Mannering's disembodied voice from an adjacent room. After some shuffling and muttered curse words, the large bearded man appeared, fastening his belt as he walked.
I wasn't sat on my arse. I was having a shit. So, what's the story with the two lovebirds?
Assault, GBH and resisting arrest. Usual crap for New Year. This pair started the festivities earlier than most, but they'll have plenty of company by midnight, I'm sure. Bruce sighed.
No doubt. I fucking hate New Year's Eve. Gives all the pissheads and idiots license to run riot. We'll probably be packing them in like sardines before the end of the night.
He started towards the parked car.
Come on then. Might as well get these two out of the way before it all kicks off.
Pete joined Bruce by the driver's side door, while Stephen and Paul walked around to the opposite side. Stephen tapped on the glass. Come on then, you two. Got a nice cosy selfie to ring the new year in from. Still, could be worse. You could be spending it in A&E like that poor bastard you gave a kicking to. Paul cracked his knuckles.
It's still not too late. Any shit from either of you, and you might accidentally fall down some stairs, if you catch me in it.
When neither of the car's occupants responded, Paul and Bruce opened the car's doors and hauled the man and woman out, with Pete and Stephen placing a firm grip in their arms as soon as they were clear of the vehicle. Bruce walked ahead of them and sat down behind his desk once more. He removed 2 plastic trays from behind him and nodded to the man.
Empty your pockets, put the contents in there, and take your belt and laces out your shoes.
The man smiled at the custody officer and lifted his arms to show the handcuffs, then shrugged. Bruce let out a sigh of frustration.
Officer Bacon, would you mind taking the cuffs off these two?
Stephen took out the key to the handcuffs and was about to unlock them when something in the man's demeanour made him pause. It felt like they were waiting, anticipating something, like they were exactly where they wanted to be. He nodded to Pete as he unlocked the cuffs and the other removed the canister of pepper spray from his belt. Bruce tapped on the side of the plastic tray with a pen.
Now, pockets, belt, laces.
A grin played across the man's face. Of course, officers. Happy to oblige. He removed the belt from his jeans, letting them fall to the floor, then stepped out of his trainers and pulled his t-shirt over his head. The woman followed suit, undressing in a matter of seconds. Neither wore any underwear beneath their outer garments. Bruce put up his hands.
Whoa, steady on. If we want you to strip when I told you, put your bloody clothes back on.
The woman stepped forward, an innocent smile on her lips. Oh, but the clothes are so restrictive, don't you think? Don't you prefer me this way? Stephen felt an ice finger of fear run up his spine. This wasn't right. It wasn't right at all. He glanced at Pete and saw his own suspicions mirrored on the other police officer's face. The man lashed out with his left arm, flinging Pete away from him as if he were a small child. He turned around and Stephen saw that his eyes had turned a feral yellow and rivulets of blood were running down the man's chin. He smiled at Stephen with a mouthful of bone razors. I don't think we'll be needing the handcuffs. Tell me, Officer Bacon, will you squeal for me? 31st December 2008, St Paul's Church Hall, High Moor, 21:02 hours. Screams echoed around the church hall, high-pitched, piercing. The sound of over 24 children running riot. Sharon massaged her temples and wished that she'd had the presence of mind to bring some painkillers with her, or earplugs, or a net. The New Year's Eve creche had been established a few years ago to give some of the town's parents the chance to go out without having to worry about finding a babysitter. 2 local women, Tonya Brown and Angela Crawford, ran it every year, and as far as Sharon was concerned, both were either saints or completely insane. Possibly both. Tonya was currently playing a game of musical statues with some of the children, while Angela read stories to the younger ones. The rest of the little darlings were tearing around the place, howling like banshees. Sharon was looking after the tuck shop, which was, in reality, a collapsible table piled high with cakes, sweets and sugary drinks. She'd questioned the wisdom of this, and Tonya had just smiled, explaining that it was just their little bit of fun. They could hand back tired and contented children at the end of the night, sure, but it was much funnier to return bouncing balls of frantic energy. As a result, she'd forbidden her young nephew any of the items on display, which had not gone down well at all. Matthew was refusing to talk to her, and when she'd offered him some food, he'd regarded her with an incredulous mixture of disgust and pity. The pack of screaming children reached the end of the hall, then changed direction in the same synchronous way a flock of starlings might, stampeding straight towards her. Sharon thought for a moment that they might just crash into the table and send its contents spilling across the floor, but they all skidded to a stop just in time and began clamouring for the sugary treats. Sharon felt her headache go up a notch, and she began to regret not taking Helen up on her offer. A curry followed by a hot, sweaty pub music seemed like a nice, peaceful way to spend the evening by comparison. She fought to keep the irritation out of her voice.
One at a time, form a line and nobody's going to get anything.
The children shuffled into something approaching the line. A pudgy blonde-haired girl managed to push her way to the front of the queue and held out a £1 coin. I want some cake and a can of Coke and one of those biscuits and...
You can have a can of drink and either some cake or a cookie for £1, sweetie. Everything's 50p each.
The girl's brow furrowed and her face began to redden. My mummy says I can have anything I want. This statement didn't really come as much of a surprise to Sharon. The child had an arrogance about her, and from the rows of fat that were beginning to jowl under her chin, she was clearly not someone who was told no very often, if at all. She forced her sweetest smile onto her face and leaned forward so that she was level with the girl.
For £1, you can have 2 things from the table, and really, any more than that and you'll end up feeling sick. Those slices of cake are quite big.
The girl rolled her eyes and shoved her hand back into her pocket, producing a lightly sticky £5 note. There, I want 2 slices of cake and a can of Coke and a cookie, and make sure you give me the right money back. Mummy says that people like you will steal anything. Sharon's eyes widened, and her temper began to bubble up through the cracks in her forced demeanour.
I beg your pardon? What did you just say to me?
The child narrowed her eyes and put her hands on her hips. You heard? That was it. There was no way she was going to put up with being spoken to like that by anyone, especially not some fat, spoiled little child.
Well, you're not getting anything with an attitude like that, young lady. Go on, get out the queue, I'm not serving you.
The child's face turned a darker shade of red. You can't talk to me like that. My mummy says...
Well, your mummy isn't here, and to be honest, it won't do you any harm to stay away from cakes for a while. Now, stop holding the line. I have cakes and sweets to give to good little boys and girls.
The child let out a high-pitched wail of frustration, a piercing shriek that seemed to start off at a frequency that only dogs could hear, and then drop down to a level that made Sharon's fillings vibrate. The girl folded her legs up underneath her body, seeming to levitate for a moment, before her not inconsiderable bulk crashed down onto the wooden floor of the church hall. Sharon was a little surprised that the girl didn't go straight through into the basement. Tonya, obviously quite experienced at this sort of thing, appeared behind the screaming girl, and catching Sharon's gaze, rolled her eyes and made a face behind the child's back, then kneeled down and put a hand on her shoulder. Now, Bella, what's all this noise about? Bella grunted at Tonya, her breath catching in her throat. A bubble of mucus had formed on her left nostril, and she was inflating and deflating in time to her sobs. She won't let me have any sweets. Well, I'm sure that if Mrs. Fletcher won't let you have any sweets, then you must have done something. The mucus bubble burst, and with that small, moist explosion, Bella's voice returned. I didn't do anything. She's just a horrible, nasty, mean bitch. She said I was too fat. It was all Sharon could do not to laugh as Tonya puffed her cheeks out and crossed her eyes. She bit her lip before forcing her words out, trying to maintain a serious tone.
I wouldn't serve you, Bella, because you were rude to me.
Tonya's mouth fell open in mock surprise, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with sarcasm. You weren't rude, were you, Bella? Oh dear, what will your mother say when I tell her? Bella mumbled something. Sorry? Said Tonya, leaning forward with her hand cupped to her ear. Were you trying to say something? Sorry, muttered Bella. Tonya winked at Sharon. Don't say sorry to me. You need to apologise to Mrs. Fletcher for being rude. Bella looked up at Sharon with pure hatred gleaming in her piggy eyes and spoke with a voice that dripped venom. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fletcher. Can I have my sweets now? Sharon gave the child a smile that would have been better suited on a shark.
Of course, Bella. You can have a can of drink and 1 slice of cake. After all, we want to leave something for the other children, don't we?
Tonya's cheeks were puffed out again, and she minded shoveling cake into her mouth with 2 fists behind Bella's back. Sharon couldn't help it this time, and with a snort of laughter escaped her lips. Fortunately, Bella didn't seem to notice. She handed Sharon her pound coin and stalked away with her paper plate and a can of drink towards the back of the hall. Tonya began rounding up the other children for a snack break, and for the next 10 minutes, Sharon distributed the remaining cakes, cookies and sweets until only a few pieces were left over. Mindful that Bella was watching the rapidly emptying table with interest, Sharon noticed 3 young children, a girl of around 11 years old, plus 2 younger boys sitting by themselves. They'd not come to the table for food, and she suspected that their parents had packed them off to the creche without any money. She put the last 3 cookies on a paper plate and walked over to them.
Here you are. I noticed you didn't come up with everyone else. I'll save you some cookies if you want them.
The 2 boys looked uncertain, and their gaze flicked to the girl. She smiled at Sharon. "No, thank you, we're fine." Sharon bent down.
Listen, if it's about the money, it doesn't matter. This can be a treat from me.
The girl stepped forward and gently but firmly pushed the plate away. "I said no, thank you. We're going to eat later, and we don't want to spoil our appetite." Sharon took a step backwards, suddenly uncomfortable in the children's presence and wanting nothing more to be as far away from them as she could get. A ridiculous notion, of course, but as she made her way back to the table, she was surprised that her legs felt weak and her arms were trembling. She tried to shake the feeling off, but something gnawed at her. Perhaps it was the way that the girl's eyes seemed almost yellow in the harsh light of the church hall, or perhaps it was the way that all 3 of them had turned in unison to look at Bella when they talked about eating later.
That's it. And hopefully that'll be out before the end of the year.